I really like also this play aspect and involving children in it, because rather than them feeling like this is a serious thing, we have to regenerate the landscape and we're, trying to work with climate change and it's a serious and solemn thing, it becomes play, it becomes fun, it becomes exciting. And then they start being creative with it. Like, oh, what if we do this? What if we do this? They participate with it. It's again that relationship, the participating with nature and with each other.
Yeah, our daughter and her friend, every time we see them by themselves, they're like sitting with piles of rocks, making canals and ponds and building mountains because they see the adults making these water retention systems. So for them, it's just play. But what we're actually doing is helping them rehearse land regeneration, which, we talked about this in one of our previous discussions, that parenting for regeneration is one of the most important jobs right now, making it normal for kids to feel like adults just regenerate land. And this is a perfect example. 3-year-old kids making ponds, making little canals and ponds to retain water because we're in a desert environment where we need to retain water. It's like, of course, that's part of regenerative parenting. And the kids will just do it because we're making it fun.
It reminds me of that conversation, actually, the idea that this kind of lifestyle also builds personal resilience in people, and like the almost like the Western, or I guess kind of liberal attitude is that we are fragile and we must be protected and we must be sheltered from any of these kind of external negative influences. And I like that this way of thinking, this design pathway that you're talking about, puts people out in nature, exposes them more, and also demonstrates to them that they're not fragile, that they can actually grow and benefit from exposure.
Yeah, actually, this is a really important element, which is how do humans become part of the landscape? And I've even come up with a somewhat poetic way of describing it, that all we are is animated dust that is dancing with water. It's what it means to be alive, right? Is minerals from the Earth's crust that have been dynamically developed with water, with membranes for all of the cells in our bodies. So we are water dancing with dust. And so you start to feel that. So it's no longer just a metaphor, but as a way of being. What it means is that, like, you have dirt under your fingernails, because I was picking grass this morning in a place where there's a transition happening in the forest ecosystem. Bushes are coming back, but there was grassland before. So we're pulling the grass between the bushes to give the bushes an acceleration, so it becomes more forest-like. Then I end up with the dust under my fingers. I get dirty, I get calluses, and bumps and scrapes, but I feel good about it. And so this relationship is, again, it's just so invigorating once you start to do it.
And this is how we restore our microbiome as well, because we are meant to be interacting with nature and with dirt and plants and animals all the time. But instead, we sit in these boxes where we're isolated from the elements. And it's no wonder our gut microbiome is unhealthy, and that we have to, then take all this stuff to try to fix it, which even makes it worse. Instead, we just need to go out and into the dirt and restore it that way, again, through restoring our relationship with nature. Everything is connected.
Yeah, and another thing that's really interesting about that is how much we've normalized being unhealthy. So my wife had a history of hormonal issues of various kinds that she didn't necessarily know were related to hormones. But when she was younger, she took birth control pills and they did different things to her body. And as you know, having been pregnant and had a child, like, the reproductive system of a woman is incredibly complex, how all the hormones interact with each other. So the imbalances can be subtle and chronic. And so what happened was, when we moved away from the US and lived in the forest in Costa Rica, and we got away from all the synthetic fabrics in our homes, my wife's libido and her monthly cycle, her menstrual cycle, started to normalize. Well, she's never in her life had a normal menstrual cycle. She's always had, she's one of those women who's always had an irregular cycle. And we hadn't quite put it together that it might be synthetic fibers in the furniture in our houses, in the carpeting, in the paint, and all the electrical infrastructure around. Like, we can't say what the causes were because there are too many. There's so many synthetic chemicals that we're constantly exposed to. But when we lived in a simple tiny house in a rainforest, after a few months, her body was detoxing. And so it's just really like this regenerative health aspect is incredibly complex to figure out how it all works. But we've normalized sickness to such an extent that women have hormonal problems. We have all these jokes about women's hormones. But think about environmental toxicology, how messed up women's bodies are because of this. And it's normalized.
Yeah.
Huge deal.
This is one reason I like the idea of having kind of biodomes, geodesic domes, and kind of integrating nature into your normal living space. Like, and the sort of insulation, like we're looking for insulation when we build houses. We want to be insulated from weather and from the elements. But this brings in a lot of those elements into the space while not exposing you to a lot of cold and wetness and stuff. So you can have streams running through your living room, or you can have plants around the perimeter of a dome and really be breathing air directly from the plants and be integrated with it without the downsides.
And you can have glass panels or, some sort of
the sun exposure.
see-through panels
Yeah.
so that you get more sunshine, not sitting in the dark all the time. Yeah, this point about hormonal imbalances, it's not just your physical health, because everything is connected. What I found for me is that my sense making was affected when I was on IUD, which is like an implant that has little bits of hormones that it releases over several years, and it actually fucked up my sense making. Like, I was thinking differently. I was not the same person mentally. And then when I went off of it to try to have a baby, it was a huge transformation. It was really intense. I was like, holy shit, this is what it feels like to be a woman, actually. And because these hormones, they keep you, at least this particular one, it keeps you basically at a pre-adolescent level of hormones. So here I was, a woman in my late 20s with pre-adolescent level of hormones. It's like it made me unable to access certain levels of wisdom. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. Can you expand that? Like, what did you feel like you got access to?
Like, being more connected with the actual properly functioning reproductive system realigned me to be more in tune with life and what creates those conditions that are conducive to life. Not only for my own health, but also for the health of systems, family, relationships, economy. Because it was on a very meta level for me. It rippled out.
Yeah,
I don't know how to describe it in you. Yeah.
There's something really important about like age appropriate development. Like, when you're in your late 20s, you should be an adult. And so you should feel like and function like an adult. And when you're in your 50s or your 60s, you should start to feel like an elder. And there are developmental stages that are age appropriate. And there are a whole bunch of ways that consumer marketing has stunted or altered this human development pathway. And so it's really interesting, like, where we are doing this work on landscape regeneration, one of the most important pieces is the elders. There are these people who have been here for 30 years or longer, who know a lot about how things used to be, and they have a lot of wisdom in the ways that they live their lives, very simple wisdom, but they don't feel empowered to connect with young people who would be doing a lot of the manual labor part. So when we talk about landscape regeneration, it's easy to imagine someone like with a hoe or with a pickaxe or whatever, like physically out there in the field doing work. But some of the most important work is relationship work. And a lot of that relationship work is done by the elders. Like, for example, if I'm out working in the field, there might be a 60-year-old woman who loves playing with kids that's playing with my daughter while I'm doing a little work. And so there are lots of ways that this relationship work, which is extremely important, is being done. And that's very age appropriate for elders.
It's
Yeah.
funny
So
too, because there's so many parts of that relationship that are broken at a cultural level that, like, just an example, UV and I are scouting the properties and trying to build this regenerative center. And we've been talking with my parents quite a lot because they want to be involved and work on the land. And, there's kind of this broken dynamic of how information is shared and how wisdom is shared. In that, like, I don't mean to throw them under the bus, but I don't think there is that kind of like understanding that we lack experience that they have, and that there's a need for that exchange and that they could step into that role. At the moment, it seems more atomized. Like, it seems more just kind of standard fare capitalist Western way of thinking. My castle, my corner, stay out of it. And that you can see it enter into family life as well, not just like our family and other families. It's also like compartmentalization and atomization within the family unit itself, where it's like, I don't want to do that stuff. Like, I don't want to be part of that physical labor, but we're not asking for that. We're asking for wisdom.
Yeah.
We want participation. We want wisdom in that sense that we don't have access to. So there's like, I don't know if it's incentives or culture or a combination of a lot of things, but it's hard for our generation to connect to the wisdom of older generations. And I think it's a pretty big cultural basis for that.
Yeah, it's a big issue. And, getting back to the idea of regeneration at a territorial scale, one thing that happens when you go to the scale of an entire landscape, so this is sort of contrasted with something like an eco-village, where you try to take a group of people that are like-minded and go off to create a community together. And here we're talking about there's an extended network of different kinds of people with different subcultures spread across the landscape. And in this kind of a context, what gets really interesting is to look at the functional dependencies, where these different subcultures depend on each other, but it may not be conscious. So like where we are, there are these campesino farmers, and they depend on their food being bought by people in town. So you have a lot of like functional relationships. But when you get to the ethics or the social aspects of those relationships, there's a lot of opportunity to do things like house parties. Like invite everyone over for Sunday brunch and talk and just build relationships. Or have a big party and play some music and have some beer and get to know each other. And these things that are actually super important to do because they're underdeveloped. They're not as developed as they need to be to have the capacities we need for them. And what's interesting is how much that work is actually, again, it's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, when I think of like business relationships, they've always come from big parties, ridiculous parties. Like the best kind of deals and relationships have always come from that, when we got to know each other and we let the guard down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm walking across the room to show you my magic elixir. This right here is a 4-liter bottle of ginger beer that I ferment from yeast that's in the air with sugar, water, and grated ginger.
Nice.
And that is my elixir for healing community, because it's delicious, it'll get you tipsy, and everyone wants to try it. Yeah. And so as I'm making ginger beer and inviting people over to help make it and help drink it, I'm building community.
Yes.
The brand new Future Thinkers members portal is now live. Develop your sovereignty and self-knowledge with our in-depth courses, get access to our weekly sense-making calls, join the Q&As with past podcast guests, and much more. Become a Future Thinkers member today at futurethinkers.org/members. Enter the Future Thinkers giveaway and win our brand new community membership, including in-depth courses, private calls, and more, as well as a supply of Qualia, a complete cognitive upgrade for your brain. To enter the contest, simply go to futurethinkers.org/giveaway and sign up for our mailing list to instantly get our 50-page guide on how to adapt to the future. There are many ways to increase your chances of winning. Enter the competition today.